Christopher Columbus died in 1506, still believing he had reached India. He never found out the truth. Just a few years earlier, a handful of letters written by an Italian merchant named Amerigo Vespucci exploded across Europe and completely shattered the illusion. In this video, we're going back to the moment Europe woke up and realized Columbus hadn't found a new route to Asia. He had found an entirely new world, and that's exactly why two continents are named America, not Columbia. Let's go back to the beginning. In 1492, Christopher Columbus pitched an incredibly bold idea to the Spanish monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella. He wanted to sail west across the Atlantic to reach the riches of the East, specifically India, China, and Japan, the lands described by Marco Polo. At that time, educated Europeans already knew the Earth was round. The debate wasn't about the shape of the Earth, it was about the size. Columbus believed the Earth was much smaller than it actually is. He thought sailing west would be a short, profitable shortcut to the Indies. He called his destination the Indies. To him, Cuba was Japan, Hispaniola was somewhere near China, and every island he landed on was just another stepping stone toward the wealthy courts of the Great Khan, even when things didn't match what Marco Polo had described. No grand cities, no silk, no porcelain, and very few spices. Columbus refused to accept he might be wrong. He kept writing in his logs that he was on the outskirts of Asia. He even had his crew formally affirm they had reached the Indies. Why? Because his funding, his reputation, and his future depended on it. The most revealing moment came during his third voyage in 1498. While exploring the coast of what is now Venezuela, near the mouth of the Orinoco River, Columbus encountered an enormous flow of fresh water pouring into the sea. He realized this could only come from a massive landmass, not just another island. In his own words, he wrote, "I believe that this is a very great continent, which until now has remained unknown." That sounds like a breakthrough, right? But here's the twist. Even after writing those words, Columbus immediately tried to fit this discovery into his old theory. He suggested this huge continent was actually the eastern edge of Asia, or perhaps the biblical paradise. He continued telling the Spanish crown that he was close, very close, to the rich trading ports of India and China. He just needed more ships and more funding for the next voyage. For the rest of his life, Columbus stubbornly clung to the idea that he had reached the eastern edge of the known world. He died in 1506, still calling the lands he explored the Indies. So if Columbus never accepted the truth, when did Europe finally figure it out? The first major crack in Columbus's story appeared in 1499. While Columbus was still sailing around the Caribbean, insisting he was near China, a Portuguese captain named Vasco da Gama completed an epic voyage around the southern tip of Africa and reached real India, the actual India that Europe had been dreaming about for centuries. Da Gama docked in Calicut, traded directly with Indian merchants, and returned to Portugal in 1499 with ships loaded with black pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and other precious spices. This was the real thing. Europeans could smell the difference. Suddenly, the Spanish court had a direct comparison. What Columbus was bringing back, mostly parrots, tobacco, some gold trinkets, and unfamiliar people, looked nothing like the rich, sophisticated trade networks that Da Gama had just accessed. The contrast was impossible to ignore, but it was the written reports that really started shifting opinions in Europe. One of the most important early voices was Peter Martyr an Italian scholar living at the Spanish court. He interviewed Columbus and other explorers and sent regular letters across Europe. In these dispatches, he began openly referring to Columbus's discoveries as the Western Continent or the New World, rather than the Indies. He made it clear that this was something unknown to the ancients, not part of Asia. Then came the decisive blow. between 1502 and 1504. Letters written by Amerigo Vespucci began circulating widely across Europe. Vespucci, a Florentine merchant and navigator, had sailed along the coast of what we now call South America, first under the Spanish flag, then the Portuguese. In one particularly famous letter, known as Mundus Novus, New World, published around 1503, Vespucci described what he saw in vivid, sometimes shocking detail. He wrote about people who go completely naked. Their skin is reddish from the sun. They have no clothing, no iron, no steel, no personal possessions. They live in communal houses and sleep in hammocks. Fathers and daughters, brothers and sisters sometimes lie together. He emphasized that these lands had no kings in silk robes, no great cities, no spices, no porcelain, and no evidence of being anywhere near India or China. Vespucci concluded something revolutionary. I have found a continent which I believe may be more densely populated and full of animals than our Europe or Asia or Africa. We may rightly call it a new world. These letters became an instant publishing sensation. They were printed and reprinted in multiple cities, Venice, Paris, Antwerp, and beyond. For the first time, ordinary educated Europeans were reading clear evidence that Columbus had not found the edge of Asia. He had found an entirely different continent. This was one of the moments when the illusion finally began to shatter. Vespucci wasn't the only voice, but his letters played a major role in shifting European understanding. This was the moment the illusion finally shattered. The naming by 1507, the idea of a new world was spreading fast. That same year, a German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller and his colleagues published a revolutionary New World Map. This wasn't just any map. It was the first map in history to show the newly discovered lands as a separate continent, completely detached from Asia. And right there on the map, printed across the southern landmass, was a bold new name, America. Waldseemüller chose this name to honor Amerigo Vespucci. Interestingly, he later reconsidered this decision, but by then, the name had already spread. In the map's accompanying booklet, he explained that since Vespucci had discovered and described these lands more accurately than anyone else, it was only right to name the continent after him, using the Latin feminine form of his name, America. Imagine that two entire continents, North and South America, would eventually be named after a relatively unknown Italian merchant and navigator, while Christopher Columbus, the man who made the first voyage, did not have continents named after him. Of course, history is rarely that simple. There's still debate today about how many voyages Vespucci actually made. Some scholars believe the famous 4 voyages letter was partly exaggerated or edited by publishers for sales. But regardless of the exact details, it was Vespucci's clear, detailed, and widely published writings that convinced Europe they were dealing with something entirely new. Not the Indies that Columbus had promised. By the time Waldseemüller made his map, the name America began to stick. Later maps followed suit, and within a few decades, the name became permanent. Columbus had discovered the lands, but Vespucci helped to reveal what they truly were. Columbus had discovered the lands, but Vespucci had discovered what they truly were. So when did Europe finally realize that Columbus had not reached India? It wasn't in 1492. It wasn't even in 1498, when Columbus himself glimpsed the truth, but refused to accept it. The real turning point came between 1503 and 1507, when Amerigo Vespucci's letters spread across Europe and Martin Waldseemüller put the name America on the map. In the end, he wasn't the first person to step foot on the land who shaped history. It was a person who correctly understood and clearly explained what that land actually was. Christopher Columbus was an extraordinary navigator and a man of incredible vision and courage, but his stubborn belief that he had reached Asia blinded him to the greatest geographical discovery in human history. Amerigo Vespucci, on the other hand, looked with fresh eyes. His honest, detailed descriptions helped Europe wake up to the reality of an entirely new continent, a new world. This story reminds us that discovery is not just about reaching a place first. It's about understanding what you found. And sometimes the person who gets the credit, or in this case, has two continents named after him, is not the one who arrived first, but the one who truly comprehended the meaning of the journey. So the next time someone says, Columbus discovered America, you can smile and reply, well, it's a little more complicated than that.